In the last years, philanthropic foundations have steadily increased their commitment towards quality journalism. In the following session, representatives from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Knight Foundation, and Open Society Foundations expand on their respective goals and methodology to promote better journalism across the globe.
10 years ago, if somebody had said that philanthropists would fund newspapers, media outlets, non-profit ones, or even for-profit ones, we could have considered it as a sort of stupidity. Now, 10 years later, we all wonder if the funding by foundations is one of the solutions. 2 years ago, an American organization, the Foundation Center, published a report, a study on the topic growth in foundation support for media in the US. Between 2009 and 2011, over 1,000 foundations authorized more than $1.8 billion in media-related grants. If treated as a single category, media-related grant-making would have ranked 7th in the United States. That's to say, just after environment. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation came second, and the Knight Foundation third. And if we consider the whole world, we have today representatives of the most important foundations for media-related grants. Michael Bolden, you are the editorial director of the Knight Foundation, that a lot of us know very well. Maria Teresa Ronderas, you are the director for the Independent Journalism Foundation of the Open Society Foundations. And Miguel Castro, you are responsible for strategic partnerships, communications for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We will have 3 topics. The first one will be about the identity, the style, the goal of each of the foundations. Then we will go to a more practical part of the debate. How do you do this grant making? Then we will speak about the future role of foundations regarding the business model of media outlets. So, Michael.
So, I mean, the first thing that you really have to understand about Knight Foundation is that we come from journalism. And as we invest in journalism, we focus on 4 primary areas. The first is leadership and talent. We like to focus on transformational leaders who are helping to guide journalism to its next best future. How can we ensure that people in this room and people throughout the journalism field have the training they need to move to the next step? We focus on journalism excellence. How can we improve storytelling and news gathering? How can we cover those critical gaps that exist in reporting in our communities? Then we focus on audience engagement and development. How can we reach the readers better? What can we do to help connect our newsrooms with those people? And lastly, but most certainly not least important, we focus on freedom of expression and information.
Maria Teresa, what are the goals, the targets of the Open Society Foundations, and what impact do you look for?
What we do is, it's in our title, it's opening journalism, and it's opening society, and it's independent journalism. So that's exactly what we do. We promote and we support independent journalism in the world, especially and particularly in those places and topics where there is not a lot of public debate about, where the independent voices are not heard. We also protect journalists. We are very much involved in projects and ways of learning and understanding how we can develop mechanisms to better protect journalists physically, legally, and digitally.
The foundation has an overarching goal, fairly aspirational, which is that all lives have equal value. And there is a number of strategies between 25 and 30 that deal with global health and global development issues that goes from the eradication of diseases like malaria or polio to give access to financial services to the poor, to agricultural development, etc., etc. So that is primarily the goal of the foundation. So the media grant making, as the advocacy work and the policy work and the government relationships work, is in service of the program priorities. We're very impact oriented principally for one reason. Because we can see every day the big needs that the world has in terms of eradicating poverty and all of these big issues. So every dollar that we spend on supporting journalism is a dollar that doesn't go to a vaccine in Africa or a project of any sort in India, etc., etc. So we are under a lot of pressure to prove impact, to prove the real value of journalism when we invest on media. Similarly, our advocacy and policy colleagues are.
Would you mind giving us very specific examples of projects or media outlets that you fund?
So one of our long-standing partners is The Guardian. The Guardian has a vertical called the Global Development Site, which is originally was about informing and engaging audiences globally about the Millennium Development Goals, how countries were reaching or graduating from those goals, how close we were, what are the solutions to those problems, and reporting stories, human stories about what was going on the ground and bringing the Millennium Development Goals, which is a very technical concept, to larger audiences. And it's now easily in the English-speaking world the platform where people get the information about news about development and global health. The International Center for Journalists, we're working with on an ecosystem very quickly in Africa that includes an element of capacity building that we don't do anywhere else. So innovation challenge, so the technology that is needed for newsrooms to engage audiences is developed. Content challenge, where journalists get funding to do long-form stories, where they have funding to report in-depth on the issues that matter for their audiences. Then a mentoring program where senior journalists sit in the newsroom and mentor over the period of a year, which is the Knight Foundation model of fellowships that we sort of inherit.
Well, another project that's really interesting and that I think we're exciting is some journalistic projects that are actually learning how to become an independent, strong journalism outlet in places with very difficult authoritarian rule. Like, for example, in Malaysia, Kini. For example, another very different project is, for example, Atlazo in Hungary, which is a small project of also investigative reporters, but they're also doing a very interesting sort of intermediary role to help society get the information of the government through freedom of information requests.
Two specific projects. Just this week, we announced funding for Guardian US to develop a mobile platform and also to work on audience engagement. We know, of course, that that's where the next play is. And so we want to experiment and encourage the Guardian to not only create and develop new tools that are mobile-based, but also to share those with the wider field so that people who aren't there yet can get there. Another project that's worth mentioning is one that we sponsored with the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Mozilla. It's called the Coral Project. They are working on what some people have just called a commenting platform, but it's really about building a new community platform so that people who are engaged with the news can do so in a safe way and also feel that they're part of the storytelling narrative.
How do you do this grant making? Something more newsroom-centric. How do you proceed? How do you relate first to the sector, then to the grantees? What are your criteria, the rules, the constraints? How does it function if for those who would like to work hand in hand with you?
We are really keen that anyone that partners with us gets to know the foundation inside out as better as possible, because unfortunately, there is a fair amount of misperceptions about what the foundation does and how we operate. So especially from journalism, sometimes it takes a little bit to get to trust us as much as we trust them. So we'll look for partners that we're very strong on audiences. We know our audiences. We segment it very clearly. We do a lot of research. So we'll look for media organizations that are able to produce accurate, compelling, timely, and sort of engaging content for those audiences. We have a goal that we want to reach, and that goal is defined jointly between the media organizations and ourselves, and it's around raising awareness or raising knowledge or raising understanding about issues or about other societies or about a pro-poor agenda. We agree that outcome, and we set a strong path to measure if we're reaching that outcome, and we engage in as long as possible. This sometimes takes up to a year, so we're not the quickest in turnaround.
What are the new activities for newsrooms to be able to work with?
Okay, we have like two or three ways to do. We have this advantage of having local foundations that know the field very well. So in some cases we have trusted partners for many years, and we just support their work, very hands-off. But we also have some areas in which we work like what we call concepts. So we actually have an idea that we want to develop, and one of these ideas actually that we are currently developing is working with newsrooms, with big media organizations, that many are here, to develop partnership with smaller media organizations or newer media organizations in some of these more difficult parts of the world, or in some cases, in some difficult topics, so that the big organization can learn from the small, from the context, from the local ground, but at the same time that the little organization or the smaller or the newer organization can actually learn from the bigger organization on how to develop in the marketing department, or how to develop in the social networking campaigns, or how to track their data. Those are the sort of concepts that then we go out, we work with them hand in hand. We use our bird's eye view of the world, because we're seeing so many projects at the same time that we can actually make these people here aware of what these others are doing there. And that's something that people usually value.
So we work in several different ways. I mean, so grant making at Knight Foundation isn't monolithic at all. We actually have several different programs where people come to us. Many of you have probably heard of the Knight News Challenge, of course, which is a themed competition that we do at this point probably twice a year, where we have a fixed application period where people submit their applications. We have a platform where they can refine it, where others can comment on it. And from the time that challenge opens until it closes, that process probably takes 6 months. It's not a lengthy process. One of the things that our CEO likes to say is that we want to get money out the door as quickly as we possibly can, because we believe in experimentation, we believe in taking risk. And so the News Challenge is one vehicle for that. The second is the Knight Prototype Fund, and that's really where we know most of the ideas going into the Prototype Fund are going to fail. But they're designed to be smaller projects. We do an investment of $35,000. The people who join that become part of a cohort where they go through a process that includes design training, a demo day. They get a chance to relate to other people. But we know that no matter what they produce, that we're going to be able to take lessons from it, whether the project succeeds and moves on for additional funding through some of our more traditional grant-making processes, or if it fails, there are lessons that we can extract from that and share with the field so that the next person who wants to try something similar can learn from that. Something else that we do, which actually we have a venture capital fund called the Knight Enterprise Fund. And what the Knight Enterprise Fund does is that we invest in portfolio companies whose mission is aligned with the goals that we have towards media and quality information. We're usually the minority partner in those types of arrangements. But what we find in many cases, it isn't just about providing the funding to people. We like to provide access to our network, which we know is very valuable. We provide access to the contacts. And we like to remain very involved with our grantees to sort of help them through that process. I mean, so it's not just about reporting to us about what they're doing, but is also what can we do for them. For example, if they're in the middle of communicating a need for something, like the Coral Project needed to hire developers, right? So one of the things our communications department can help do is to help issue the call for that, to allow them to write on our platform, to allow them to share their lessons. So we like to think that we're providing more of a holistic approach to what we're doing. You know, we give people the different funding options, and we also give different levels of support.
Do you consider that this commitment for your own foundations, for the foundations field, is a commitment in the long term for the media sector, or is it a commitment for this period when media outlets are suffering?
As I said when I began, Knight comes from journalism.
Yes.
So we will always be involved with journalism in some fashion. One of the, we've been around for 63 years, and we have changed dramatically in that time because as the sector has changed, we realized that our funding needed to change. I mean, one of the things we build into those relationships is the ability to hopefully allow them to morph as times change and to adjust what they're doing and what we're doing. So yeah, we will be part of the future.
I think that the only way out of there, I think everybody agrees, is to experiment, is to try out different things. And that experimentation is costly. And it's even more difficult and more costly in difficult parts of the world where there's no capital, no equity, no risk capital or very little, and you have much other risks, safety risks and other risks. So I think we want to be there. We want to be experimenting with specific exercises, but mostly thinking about how we can learn so that others can learn and sort of feed the ecosystem, feed the area.
I think that for as long as journalism can show impact, we can show return on investment, we can show that journalism has a value, there is a chance that the Gates Foundation will continue investing in media organizations.
Sorry to interrupt the debate. I would like to thank you all, to thank you our panelists.